I flew 3,000 miles across 3 different airports just to give my son, Donald, the final gift I spent 6 months building with my shaking hands. But when the door opened, Donald didn't hug me. He covered his nose and told me the cheap workshop smell on my clothes was ruining the atmosphere for his elite friends. He threw my handmade masterpiece near the trash and kicked me out into the rain. He had no idea that the luxury empire he brags about, every brick and every cent, is actually owned by my shadow firm. Donald took 10 minutes to evict me. Now it's my turn to put him on the street. Protocol Zero has been activated. The journey from my modest home in Boston to the glittering lights of Los Angeles had pushed my 68-year-old body to its absolute limit. My knees were screaming in pain, and my back was stiff from the cramped seats. But I didn't care. My hands, trembling from the early stages of Parkinson's, were gripped tightly around a large canvas tote bag. Inside was the Golden Horizon, a hand-carved antique ship model made from rare cherry wood. Donald had dreamed of this ship since he was 5 years old. I had sanded every curve and polished every mast until my fingers bled. But the thought of his smile kept me going. I stood outside the Vance Art Gallery, a sleek, ultra-modern building where Donald was hosting a grand party for his 30th birthday. I took a deep breath and pressed the buzzer. The heavy glass door swung open, and Donald stepped out, looking sharp in a $3,000 designer tuxedo. When I saw him, tears of joy filled my eyes. "Happy birthday, son," I whispered, opening my arms for a hug, but Donald froze. He immediately pulled a silk handkerchief from his pocket and covered his nose, taking 2 sharp steps back. He looked at my faded flannel shirt and my workshop-dusted boots as if I were a piece of rotting garbage. "Dad, what the hell are you doing here looking like this?" he hissed, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and embarrassment. He glanced nervously behind him at the elite art collectors, and his wealthy in-laws sipping expensive champagne. "I brought you a gift, Donald. The ship. The one you always wanted," I said, my voice shaking as I tried to open the bag. Donald didn't even look at the masterpiece. He kicked the bag aside, sending it sliding toward the trash bins near the entrance. "Dad, stop. There are serious investors inside. Your blue-collar look is going to destroy my reputation. People will think my father is a vagrant." "Son, I just wanted 5 minutes," I pleaded, my heart sinking into my stomach. "No, Dad. You need to leave right now. I'm not letting you embarrass me in front of these people. You have 10 minutes to get to the airport and go back home." He slammed the heavy door in my face, the click of the lock echoing like a gunshot. I stood there in the pouring rain, my shaking hands empty and my spirit crushed. Donald thought he had just disposed of a failed father. He didn't realize that the gallery he owns is controlled by a master lease held by my company, Vanguard Holdings. The rain in Los Angeles didn't feel like water. It felt like needles against my skin. I stood on the sidewalk, watching the glow of the gallery through the frosted glass. I could see Donald laughing, clinking glasses with a man in a velvet blazer, his father-in-law, a man who looked at the world as if he owned it. Donald hadn't just thrown me out, he had thrown out the only person who truly loved him before he had a bank account. I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking, but not from the Parkinson's this time. It was the cold, hard clarity of a man who had seen enough. I dialed a number that hadn't been used in years. "Sir?" A voice answered on the first ring. It was Marcus, my head of legal, and the only man who knew the full extent of my reach. "We've been waiting for your call. Is everything all right with the surprise?" "The surprise is over, Marcus," I said, my voice as flat as a grave. "Activate Protocol Zero. Target, Vance Art Gallery and all subsidiary accounts under Donald Vance Jr. I want a total liquidation of support. If my name is on the lease, the insurance, or the credit lines, pull it. Now." "Understood, sir. Initiating immediately. Do you want to leave him a grace period?" I looked at the trash bin where my hand-carved ship sat, its delicate sails already soaking in the gutter. He gave me 10 minutes, I replied. Give him the same. And Marcus? Call the catering and security firms. Tell them their contracts just expired. Inside the gallery, the music was booming. I watched through the window as Donald's smile suddenly faltered. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. His face went pale. Then the music stopped abruptly. The lights flickered and dimmed to a dull emergency glow. The elite guests began to murmur. I saw the head of security walk up to Donald, shaking his head and pointing toward the exit. The high-end catering staff began packing up the trays of caviar and champagne mid-service. Donald was frantic, gesturing wildly, trying to call someone, but I knew his business phone was already a brick. He turned toward the glass door, his eyes scanning the rainy street in a panic. He saw me. I didn't move. I stood there, 68 years old, soaked to the bone, leaning on my suitcase. I wasn't the embarrassing father anymore. I was the wall he had just crashed into at 100 miles an hour. The heavy glass doors burst open, and Donald charged out into the rain. He didn't have his handkerchief now. His face was red, sweating, and contorted in panic. Behind him, the elite guests were huddled in the dim emergency lighting of the foyer, whispering and looking at their dead phone. "You!" Donald screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "What did you do? My power is out. The caterers just walked out mid-service, and my business accounts are showing a zero balance. Did you call some union goons to mess with my systems?" I stood my ground, the rain soaking through my old flannel shirt. But I didn't feel the cold anymore. I felt like a mountain. "I didn't call any goons, Donald," I said. "I simply withdrew my support. You told me I had 10 minutes to leave. It took my legal team exactly 8 to dismantle the life I built for you." Donald let out a hysterical, looking back at the darkened gallery. "Built for me? I built this. I'm the artist of the year. I'm the one who married into the Vance family. You're just a carpenter from Boston with shaky Vance name?" I stepped closer, and for the first time Donald flinched. "Changed your last name because you were ashamed of mine. But you didn't check the paperwork, son. The Vanguard Holdings that holds the master lease on this gallery, that's my name. The private trust that pays your mortgage and the insurance every painting in that room, that's my sweat. You didn't marry into power, Donald. You were living in a house of cards I built to see if you could handle the truth." Donald's face went from rage to a sickly, pale white. He pulled out his personal shaking worse than mine. He tried to swipe, to call his wife, call anyone. "Bianca, her father. He'll fix this," he stammered, though he sounded like he was trying to convince himself. "Your father-in-law is a businessman, Donald. Businessmen don't bet on losers. Marcus just sent him a copy of your real bank statements, the ones without my monthly gifts. He knows you're broke. He's probably telling Bianca to pack her." Just then, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb. 2 men in suits, my security detail, stepped out, holding a large umbrella over me. "Sir, the car is ready," one of them said. Donald looked at the car, then at the men, then back at me. The reality was finally sinking. The embarrassing man he had kicked out was the ghost owner of his entire dad. His voice broke, the arrogance finally leaking out of him like air from a punctured tire. "Wait. You can't just... We have a party. These are important people. They were your friends because of the champagne." Stepping toward the car. "Now they're just people standing in a dark room." The black SUV pulled away slowly, leaving Donald standing in the middle of the rain-slicked pavement. I watched him through the tinted rear window. He looked small. For the first time in years, he didn't look like a high-society art mogul. He looked like a panicked boy who had just realized the floor beneath him was gone. Inside the gallery, the scene was even more brutal. Without the music, without the lights, and without the endless flow of free champagne, the elite mask of his guests shattered. I saw Bianca's father, a man who prided himself on his blue blood lineage, walking out of the gallery with a look of pure disgust. He didn't even look at Donald as he passed. He just signaled for his own driver, left his son-in-law shivering. Bianca followed shortly after. She wasn't crying. She looked furious, not because her husband was hurting, but because her status had just been liquidated. She threw a look at Donald, older than the rain. She didn't say a word. She just stepped into her father's car, slammed the door. In less than 20 minutes, Donald had gone from the man of the social leper. I had Marcus send me the real-time feed from the gallery's internal security cameras before they went off. I watched, leaving Donald alone in the darkened room. He walked over to the trash bin where he had kicked my gift, pulled out the canvas bag. The Golden Horizon, the ship I had spent 6 months sailing, was damp, its delicate cherry wood masts slightly chipped from where it had hit. Donald sat down on the wet curb, the bag in his lap, and finally he began to sigh. But they weren't the tears of a man who missed his father. They were the tears of a man who had realized he had traded a diamond for a piece of glass. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Donald. Dad, please. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I was stressed. Please, just turn the accounts back on. I'll lose everything. Bianca is leaving me. Her father is cutting me off. Please. I didn't reply. I looked at my shaking hands in the dim light. I had worked 50 years, so he would never have to know the feeling of a cold night, or I'd given him the world, and he had used it to look down on me. The driver asked softly, "Where to?" "To the workshop," I said, my voice finally cracking. Legacy to rethink. 3 months passed. The Vance Art Gallery was gone, replaced by a community youth center funded by an Donald was no longer the artist of the year. Without my capital, his elite friends had vanished like smoke. Bianca's divorce was finalized in weeks. She didn't want a husband who had to work for a living. One evening, I was back in my Boston workshop. The smell of sawdust and it was the only place I ever truly felt. There was a knock on the heavy wooden door. I opened it to find a man I barely recognized. Donald looked thin, his designer tuxedo replaced by a cheap, stained hoodie. He was holding the canvas bag I carried across 3 airports. He didn't cover his nose this time, just stood there in the cold, his head bowed. "Dad," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I've lost everything. The house, the car, friends, even Bianca. I'm sleeping on a couch in a studio apartment. I deserve it. I know I do." He reached into the bag and pulled out the Golden Horizon. He had tried to fix the chipped mast himself. It was a clumsy job, the glue was messy, but for the first time in his life he had tried something instead of just buying a replacement. "I didn't come to ask for the money back," Donald said. "I came to ask if I could sit in the back of the shop. I just want to learn how to build something real. I want to be the son of a carpenter again." I looked at his hands, soft, pampered hands that were now covered in small cuts and bruises from his failed repair. The anger that had fueled Protocol Zero suddenly felt like a heavy stone I no longer wanted to carry. "The money is gone, Donald," I said, stepping aside to let him into the warmth of the workshop. "And the Vance name is dead. But my name, our name, is still on the door." I handed him a piece of sandpaper, pointed to a rough block of cherry wood. "A father's love isn't a bank account you can overdraw," voice thick with emotion. "It's a foundation. You spent years trying to build a skyscraper on sand. Now, you're going to learn how to build one on rock. Grab a chair." We started. As we sat there in the quiet hum of the workshop, I realized that the ultimate revenge wasn't taking away his wealth. It was giving him the chance to find the Golden Horizon sat on the workbench between us, a bit scarred, a bit broken, but finally home.